Hi everyone, today I will be presenting my special education project on traumatic brain injuries. Throughout the presentation, I will be referring to traumatic brain injuries as TBI. Some background information about traumatic brain injuries. Traumatic brain injury is a major cause of death and disability in the United States, contributing to about 30% of injury deaths. Every day, 138 people die of an injury-related issue or traumatic brain injury. There are two types of head injuries associated with traumatic brain injuries. The first type we will talk about is the open head injury. Sometimes this is called a penetrating head injury, which results when an object penetrates the skull and enters the brain. They are usually focal, which means they affect a specific area of brain tissue. During this time, the brain tissue becomes more fragile because of it being hit by an object. With a closed head injury, it is a trauma in which the brain is injured as a result of a blow to the head, or a sudden violent motion that causes the brain to be knocked against the skull. The difference between the two is the closed head injury is definitely more severe, and like I was talking about, there is a violent blow, so that means that the brain tissue is hit more and it's definitely harder to go through. Symptoms of both of these range from mild, moderate, to severe. And now there is a pie chart that I included in my presentation, which just talks about leading causes of having a traumatic brain injury, and as you can see, there are a couple listed. I will list two of them. There are falls and motor vehicle accidents. Now we'll talk about a mild TBI. A mild TBI can be very misleading. People think that it's not that severe, but actually it is. It also has to deal with the severity of the physical trauma that caused the head injury. It does not indicate the severity or consequence of the head injury. To have a mild injury, one might possess having the following symptoms: headaches, memory loss, emotional disturbance, depression, feelings of suicide, and other things. A mild head injury also goes unnoticed when the injury occurs, which I found to be quite interesting. A moderate TBI quite often affects 15 out of 100,000 people in the entire world. I couldn't believe when I read that was actually true. I actually never knew that, so that was a new fact for me to learn. Unfortunately, death may occur in up to 25% of those people that suffer from a moderate TBI. Some common symptoms include blurred vision, change in hearing, personality changes, and so on. So people can experience different types of symptoms. It just depends on the individual and what they're actually going through, because everyone is different and everyone experiences different symptoms. Some defining features of a severe TBI is obviously the worst TBI that a person can encounter in their lifetime. Severe TBIs basically have the same symptoms that a mild and moderate TBI have, but it also has a higher rate of the damage of what can be done. So say someone has maybe a 10-minute headache with a mild TBI. Well, severe TBI, they could have a migraine for hours or days and be put on medication. It just depends on the individual and what they want to be done. With severe TBIs, they might require therapy, cognitive therapy, any type of behavioral therapy, and physical therapy. It depends, again, on the injury of the person. Sadly, there are a lot of people that die from severe TBIs. It actually is the most ranged death rate of TBIs. And here are some facts that I included for my presentation. Every year, at least 1.7 million TBIs occur in the United States, and that goes along an age range of males and females. But one thing that I learned that I found really interesting is that older adolescents that are male and older men are actually at a higher risk to sustain a TBI, which I didn't know. So that was interesting to learn while I was researching this topic. So when we deal with the education field, we think about children and the struggles and problems that they face on a daily basis. And no one really thinks about TBIs lasting presently, and then also they can also last in the future-oriented stage. And when it comes to children, they could deal with problems paying attention in school. So that means like staying on task and just like having that attention span to know when deadlines are needed, and they need to have time management skills, which is hard for someone who suffers from a TBI because their brain doesn't process that stuff like it normally would before the TBI. They could have language barriers, which deals with pronunciating and enunciating words properly. They also could have speech difficulties, so someone who has a TBI could, like I was talking about, like have a speech difficulty with pronunciating and enunciating words. They could be extremely exhausted while coming to school from either having nightmares or night terrors from dealing with such a big trauma like a TBI is. And they could have a lot of memory loss, so it would be good to have, like, reminders for them, or for them to make, like, lists of things to do so they remember. Memory loss is one big important thing that happens with people who suffer from TBIs. So here are some strategies for support and assistance. It is important that the school counselor, the student, the teacher, the parent, or the guardian are all on the same page, because the student is going through a really traumatic event. Even though the trauma already happened, they're dealing with the aftermath of what's going on with them cognitively, behaviorally, and physically. Cognitively and behavioral is, they could go through like certain therapies to help them. They could see a cognitive therapist to help them with writing and organizing and understanding like their memory more and spatial differences, so that would be good. The school counselor could also offer some assistance when it comes to resources. If the school counselor knows a support group for people who suffer from TBIs, I think it would be good for the school counselor to recommend the student to go to the support group. Support groups show that you're not alone, and it's a safe space to talk about your story or anything you want to talk about that's going on with your life, and other people end up sharing things that they've gone through also. There also might have to be accommodations to take place during this time. That is when the school counselor needs to meet with the student, the parent, and the teacher to discuss what's going on with what the student needs to be accommodated with during their traumatic experience that they're going through. This could be cognitively, behavioral, or physical. When I'm talking about cognitively, it might just be as simple as putting a student in the front of the classroom to have them pay attention more and stay on task. Behavioral that varies from student to student, but behavioral may have to do with not putting certain things near the student because they might behave in a certain way, like they don't like another student. You don't want to put the other student next to the student that's mean to them because they could have a behavioral outburst, and we're trying to avoid that stuff. Another type of assistance would be advocating for people who have traumatic brain injuries. There's not enough information out there about traumatic brain injuries, and there has to be more. So if we can focus and all of us do our part to educate others about traumatic brain injuries, the world will be a better place. Thank you for enjoying my presentation.